Welcome to the Becoming Superhuman podcast, where we interview extraordinary people to bring you the skills and strategies to overcome the impossible. And now, here's your host, Jonathan Levy.
Greetings, super friends, and welcome to this week's episode of the Becoming Superhuman podcast, the show where I typically interview some of the world's top superhumans to suss out the skills and strategies, techniques, and behaviors that allow them to achieve peak performance in hopes that you out there listening will be able to do the same. This week's episode is a little bit different, you guys. It is going to be an episode just of me talking, similar to the very popular episode I did on passive income. However, this episode is going to be about learning. And the reason being is I was recently asked during a podcast interview with Alex Sharfin, how important is all this to me? How important is my work to me? And the answer was very much. And it started a thought process which got me wondering why. Why is it so important to me? Why do I care so much about learning and self-improvement? What about me makes this so relevant? So I started writing and I kept writing and I kept writing, and what was going to be just a short email or blog post turned into a full podcast episode, albeit a little bit shorter than usual. And I thought I would share it with you guys on the podcast as a little bit of a change of pace. So let me know what you guys think. If you like it, don't like it, send us a tweet, share it if you do like it. And I'm really excited to hear what you guys have to say about it, whether you agree or disagree. So without any further ado, let me present to you my post, Why Learning is the Only Skill That Matters. If you've had even a passing interaction with me or any of my work, you've probably heard me talk about learning. You might have even heard me make the bold claim that the ability to learn is quite literally the only skill that matters, the meta skill that unlocks all other skills. Well, in this episode, I want to talk to you about why. I want to explain to you why learning is so important, not just to me, but for each and every one of you. But first, we have to go back in time. Learning wasn't always easy for me. Growing up, I was an energetic, bright, and pretty well-natured kid, at least for the first half of my childhood. At the age of 8, things started to take a turn for me. My inability to sit still, pay attention, or keep up with the class, once a cute phase I would surely grow out of, was no longer a laughing matter. Sitting in the classroom after the other students had all gone home, I found myself answering a series of confusing and strange questions, matching pictures to names, categorizing objects, and so on. I didn't know it then, but I was being tested for learning disabilities. My difficulties continued throughout grade school, and I was consistently behind the class in just about every subject. My teachers would note my positive attitude and enthusiasm on my report cards, but they routinely cited that I needed to put in more effort to keep up with even the most basic of tasks. I remember countless times when I had to go in after class or during recess to have something explained to me, and I remember those triumphant moments when I finally got it and my response. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry, and I had a habit of generally letting out some sort of relieved whimper as my eyes welled up with tears. These problems persisted throughout middle school, where they were met with and compounded by another set of challenges. Whereas other kids were learning valuable social skills and building friendships that would last them for the rest of their lives, I struggled, to say the least. At a time when my confidence was lower than ever due to my lousy grades, I became the laughingstock of my school. The small group of friends I did have eventually turned their backs on me, and I found myself utterly alone, dejected, and contemplating suicide. I remember etching little reminders on my arms to shut up, to stop making embarrassing comments, and to act like the more mature kids in my class. But try as I could, I simply couldn't emulate their humor, their confidence, or their body language. I was a black sheep, and in no time at all, I loathed myself way more than I loathed those who taunted me. In high school, things finally started to turn around. A friend of mine introduced me to Ritalin, and for the first time in my life, I could sit still, pay attention, and even do well in school. My doctor reluctantly agreed to prescribe me, and from then on, things got a heck of a lot better. While I still struggled to learn and remember new information as quickly or as easily as my peers, at least now I could sit long enough to do it. I spent the next few years locked away in my bedroom, heavily medicated during nearly every waking hour, and catching up on the things that I'd failed to understand during class, and working on starting a string of small businesses. The confidence boost that this resulted in allowed me to develop a small number of close friends, and while I was far from popular, I largely credit those dear friends with the fact that I survived high school at all. At the end of high school, though, I had plenty to show for it. I'd graduated on the honor roll, gotten accepted to Berkeley, and I even had $1 million business to call my own. I'd love to say that this was the end of my struggle, but in fact, it was not. College was tough for me, very tough. Though my self-esteem was improved, it was based largely on these egoic accomplishments and what I had. I still had many shortcomings, especially in my people skills. And then there were the academics. Though I entered Berkeley intending to study economics, I quickly found even that too challenging. I changed my major 3 separate times, and I ended up leaving with a sociology degree instead. And to be honest, I've long since forgotten everything I learned at Berkeley anyways. So why tell you all of this? Well, because quite simply, my entire life changed when I learned how to learn. A few years after graduating from Berkeley, I'd sold my company. To my chagrin, it had stagnated and devolved into a hostile environment during my final 2 years as CEO, largely due to my inability to grow as a leader or to learn the skills necessary to scale a business to the next level. Frustrated with the many challenges facing me in marketing, financing, scaling, and leading the company, I took the easier route and sold out. It was for this reason that I decided to go back to school. I knew that I needed to learn these critical skills if I wanted my next venture to be a bigger and more successful one. And to my great pleasure, I was accepted to one of the top business schools in the world, INSEAD. In the back of my mind, though, I had a lot of anxieties. What if I struggled to learn like I had at Berkeley? What if I still didn't have the social skills necessary to fit in? How would I keep up with the immense coursework of a condensed 1-year MBA? But fortunately for me, salvation was on the way. During a short pre-MBA internship, I met Dr. Lev Goldentouch, who introduced me to his wife, Anna Goldentouch. Lev and Anna had spent the last 10 years learning, developing, and refining techniques for accelerated learning. I enrolled in their private course, and the rest is history. After an intense period of relearning how to learn, I came away with a pretty nifty skill set. I could read at a peak rate of 800 words a minute and remember just about everything I'd read. It's hard to overstate the impact that this has had on my life. Of course, it made keeping up with the coursework at INSEAD a lot easier, but that's just one small aspect. Shortly after completing Anna's course, I had an epiphany. The only thing standing between us and achieving our dreams is learning. I look back on my biggest struggles and failures as a student, an entrepreneur, and a friend. What one component was missing in all of them? The willingness and ability to learn what I didn't know. With this epiphany in mind, I took a long, hard look at my life. And then I made a list of problems that I needed to solve. And then I dove right in. I read books on body language, books on entrepreneurship, books on physical therapy. I even read books on social skills. Of course, the changes didn't happen overnight, and I still struggled a great deal with overcoming my insecurities and fitting in with my older, more mature, and highly competitive peer group at INSEAD. But slowly, I saw improvement. I saw that this time, when I faced a shortcoming, whether it was my communication skills during group projects or my interpersonal skills in social situations, I didn't simply shut down. Instead, I was able to quickly identify what had been missing and then take the necessary steps to correct it. Now, generally speaking, Those steps included speed reading at least one book, but often many more, on whatever area of life I needed to master. And since then, whenever I've had a problem, I've remembered this one simple maxim. If you know how to learn effectively, you can become anything or anyone you want. This is so obvious when it comes to academic accomplishment that it's almost not even worth mentioning. But how about when you go into the office and you look up to your boss? What do you think differentiates you from her? Experience? Seniority? Those are just fancy ways of saying that she knows more than you do. And don't for a second forget that if that were to change, you would quickly find yourself managing her instead. This is true for any and every aspect of business, whether you need to learn about marketing, online publishing, leadership, and copywriting, as I have, or learn a new programming language, or simply learn everything there is to know about your company's products. Heck, when I decided to build my very first online course, I notoriously sat down over the course of 2 days and speed read about 150 articles, blog posts, and resources on video content production, marketplace algorithms, content marketing, and within a matter of weeks, I was the proud owner of one of the top courses on Udemy, a platform that I'd only heard about weeks prior. I've applied this template to starting my own podcast, publishing my own book, building my own online academy, and as we speak, I'm applying it to a whole new area of study: paid advertising, webinars, and marketing automation, and the results are already promising. Put simply, I know that my ability to outlearn my competitors gives me an unfair advantage and is the single biggest contributor to my success in this industry. But how about the problems I faced earlier on in my life? The inability to make meaningful and positive connections with others, and a failure to understand how quote unquote charisma works. Well, it turns out that all along, all I needed to do was read a few books on the topic, though some of them I had to read twice. As I came to understand, just like technical skills or languages or even fine motor skills, charisma, popularity, and likability can be broken down into a finite set of skills, behaviors, and understandings. And that set of skills, like every other, can be hacked. Today, I can confidently lecture in front of thousands of people, and more importantly, interact with people one-on-one in an authentic and genuine way that, at least it seems, makes me more likable and personable. I'm also blessed to have built a network of very dear and loving friends, people who I'm fairly confident wouldn't have been able to tolerate the 18-year-old Jonathan, though truthfully speaking, I'm not sure I would have been able to either. And all I needed to do was learn what others already knew: the people skills, the behaviors, the body language, the psychological adjustments that enable you to be confident without being cocky. That's all charisma and likability boil down to, and you can learn it in a handful of $4.99 books on Amazon. So how about that hobby you wish you could get into, but it just seems so much to learn? Well, I can tell you that I've applied my learning toolkit to nearly every hobby that's piqued my interest over the last few years: surfing, acro yoga, piano, guitar, gymnastics, Olympic weightlifting, language learning, rock climbing, and even aerial photography. And while I've really only carried through and gone deep with a select few of them, I can confidently tell you this: it can all be hacked. And at the end of the day, it's all just learning. So let me sum it up for you. Knowing how to learn is the only skill that matters, and most of us are never taught it. With an effective language learning toolkit, you can open just about any door imaginable. Though admittedly, I haven't been able to learn to squat 150 kilos. To every rule, there is of course an exception, and genetic limitations seem to be the exception in this case. Unfortunately, however, nobody ever teaches us how to use our brains. As Tony Buzan recently said in an interview with my dear friend, Dr. Anthony Metivier, everything we buy, from the simplest radio to our refrigerator, comes with a user's manual. And yet, for the most advanced and sophisticated supercomputer in the world, your brain, there is none. So when you hear me talk about learning, and why it's so important and what great potential each and every one of us has if we just learn to use this incredible piece of equipment we were gifted by evolution. Now you know why. I wasn't born the person that I wanted to be, but I learned how to be him. And so can you. All right, guys, that's everything I have to say this week about learning. I really appreciate you guys listening to it, and I would love to hear what you thought. By the way, if you were inspired or motivated to improve your own learning toolkit, I want to encourage you guys to check out the Become a Super Learner Masterclass, the online course where I teach everything I know about accelerated learning, memory, speed reading, and so much more. You can enroll now in a free trial, no time limit, and you don't even have to input a credit card. So if you want to check that out and give the first week a try, give the first section of the course a try, please go ahead and visit jle.vi/learn.
Thanks for tuning in to the Becoming Superhuman podcast. For more great skills and strategies, or for links to any of the resources mentioned in this episode, visit www.becomingasuperhuman.com/podcast. We'll see you next time.